A young girl left the gym and began the short walk home, just a few hundred yards away, but she never arrived. Her sudden disappearance triggered a large-scale police search. With time, the case grew into one of the most infamous in modern Italian history, shocking millions across the country. Few could have imagined that its twists and revelations would resemble the plot of a crime thriller, or that such a tragedy could unfold in reality. Yara Brazil was born on May 21, 1997, in the small Italian town of Bombata. This quiet community, located near Milan with a population of just over 7,000, was known for its calm atmosphere, historic architecture, and scenic surroundings. Yara's family had deep roots there. She grew up with devoted parents, an older sister, and 2 younger brothers. Yara cherished her hometown. She attended the local school, had many friends, and was deeply involved in gymnastics. Just a short distance from her house stood a large sports center where she spent much of her time. On November 26, 2010, at the age of 13, she planned a quick visit there to return a stereo to her coach. At around 5:15 p.m., she told her parents goodbye and left, assuring them she would be back within an hour. Given the town's reputation for safety and the gym's close proximity, her parents had no hesitation in letting her go alone. But as the evening went on and Yara still hadn't returned, their sense of ease quickly turned into worry. By 7 p.m., Yara still hadn't returned, which was very unlike her. At 7:11, her mother tried calling, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Alarmed, her parents quickly reached out to the police. The case was soon passed on to a larger police department in a nearby city about 7 miles away, where an experienced detective, Letizia Ruggieri, was assigned to lead the investigation. She wasted no time, dispatching officers to the town and enlisting the help of the military police. After speaking with Yara's parents, investigators headed to the gym to retrace her steps. Yara's coach confirmed that she had stopped by around 5:30 p.m. Friends also recalled seeing her there, chatting, doing some light exercises, and then leaving for home. Investigators discovered that at 6:44 p.m., Yara had sent a text message to a friend, the last known sign of her. This led them to conclude that she vanished somewhere along the short route between the sports complex and her home. Search teams were organized, with some patrolling the streets while others looked for witnesses and checked CCTV footage for clues. A few people near the sports center that evening reported seeing a girl resembling Yara talking to 2 men beside a red car, though police were unable to confirm whether it was truly her. Officers thoroughly searched the sports complex but found no trace of Yara. At the same time, both local and military police expanded their efforts across the town, combing the streets, nearby fields, and even the riverbanks that ran through the area. Firefighters and volunteers soon joined the search effort, yet Yara remained missing. Detective Ruggieri then brought in K-9 units. The dogs picked up her scent from personal items, but instead of tracing a path from the sports center toward her home, they led investigators in the opposite direction, toward a nearby town called Azzano. Police also requested data from Yara's cell phone. Records revealed that at 6:49 p.m., just 5 minutes after she had texted her friend, her phone had connected to a tower in Azzano. Given the distance from the sports center, it was clear she couldn't have reached the area on foot in such a short time, meaning she must have been taken there by vehicle. At this stage, Yara's trail went cold, and investigators focused on 2 main theories. The first, and far more likely, was that she had been kidnapped. The second was the possibility that she had run away, though this seemed doubtful. In her last text, she had made plans to meet a friend the following day, making it hard to believe she would suddenly decide to disappear just minutes later. Still, detectives thoroughly interviewed Yara's relatives and friends, but found no signs of family problems or personal issues. Taking the investigation further, they placed wiretaps on the phones of her family members as well as dozens of other people. Detective Ruggieri then made a bold move. She requested cell phone location data for every device that had connected to towers in Azzano on the night Yara vanished. If she had indeed been kidnapped, the abductor's phone would almost certainly show up in that data. Identifying the abductor, however, proved to be an enormous challenge. Investigators obtained data on roughly 15,000 phones that had been in the area that evening. They began scrutinizing each one, with a special unit assigned to monitor thousands of numbers flagged as suspicious for various reasons. At the same time, the search for Yara pressed on, though day after day passed without any breakthroughs. Detective Ruggieri started to lose faith in this approach, clinging to the hope that somewhere among those phone records lay the kidnapper's number. Within just a few days, officers had already listened to thousands of hours of calls, yet none provided any leads about Yara. That was the case until late November, when one officer suddenly came across a chillingly suspicious remark. During one monitored call, a man was heard saying, "Forgive me, Lord, I didn't kill her." Investigators quickly traced the voice to Mohammed Fikri, a Moroccan construction worker living in the same town where Yara's phone had last connected to a signal. Police tried to track him down, but ran into a major obstacle. The phone surveillance team was working with a several-day delay, since it was impossible to process such a massive volume of calls in real time. By the time Fikri's statement was flagged, 3 days had already passed, and he was aboard a ship bound for Morocco. The situation seemed highly suspicious, prompting Italian authorities to intercept the vessel. Fikri was detained, arrested, and brought back to Italy. At the same time, investigators uncovered another alarming clue. His car contained a mattress in the trunk with visible bloodstains. The mattress was immediately sent to the lab for testing, but what the results revealed would turn the case in an entirely unexpected direction. The blood on the mattress turned out not to be Yara's, and in fact, it wasn't even human. A closer review of the phone recording revealed that Fikri had actually said something entirely different in his native language, and the officer had mistranslated the second half of the phrase. After further investigation, police confirmed that Fikri had no connection to Yara's disappearance, forcing them to release him. By this time, Yara's case had become one of the most talked-about stories in Italy, dominating national headlines. Millions closely followed the search, clinging to the hope that she would be found alive. When news of Fikri's arrest broke, many believed the kidnapper had finally been caught. The revelation of his innocence, however, left the public stunned and deeply disappointed. It meant the investigators were back to square one with no other leads to help them find Yara. The police continued to monitor phone conversations, search for other evidence, and do everything they could, but nothing seemed to lead anywhere. This continued for exactly 3 months until February 26, 2011. On that day, a man from a small town 6 miles from Yara's home went to one of the many nearby fields to fly his remote-controlled airplane. But the airplane had some issues, and he had to land it in a spot with tall, thick grass to prevent it from crashing into the ground. When he went to retrieve it, he noticed a pile of rags. At first, he didn't think much of it, but then he saw boots sticking out from under the pile and decided to call the police. Officers found a human body under the rags, but the level of decomposition made it almost impossible to visually identify the victim. However, when the two arrived at the scene, she immediately knew it was Yara. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she went to the sports complex 3 months earlier, near the body. They also found her iPad, house keys, SIM card, and the removable battery from her cell phone, but the phone itself was nowhere to be found. Italy's most renowned forensic pathologist was brought in to examine the remains and concluded that the cause of death was multiple stab wounds. She also found no signs of assault, but the fact that some of her clothing was removed led investigators to suggest that this was the motive. Experts also found fibers on the body that were commonly used in a specific type of fabric. This suggested that the killer might work in a related manufacturing facility somewhere in the area. Additionally, they found 2 foreign DNA samples, one on the victim's gloves and another on the battery over smartphone. However, there were several issues. The samples were quite small, making it difficult to extract a full profile. There were also no matches in the various databases, so the investigators found themselves at another dead end. But 2 months later, Letizia received an unexpected call. Experts from the lab reported that upon further investigation of the victim's belongings, they had discovered biological material on her underwear, and the analysis yielded a full DNA profile of an unknown man with the killer's DNA. In hand, Letizia divided the officers into different teams and assigned them specific tasks. Some were responsible for collecting DNA samples from all of Yoda's relatives, acquaintances, and everyone at the sports complex. Others focused on analyzing cell phone location data, compiling a list of numbers belonging to people who traveled from Yara's town to Pello that evening, and then collecting their DNA samples. Given the scale of these tests, she had to wait weeks for results which were slow in coming. Even with 3 laboratories across Italy working on the DNA samples, the process could take years. In the following months, the police collected thousands of DNA samples, but none matched the killer's profile. Meanwhile, Letizia kept thinking how to get new leads, and soon she had an idea not far from the field where Yara's body was found. There was a nightclub. Letizia knew that killers often leave their victims' bodies in familiar areas, and this club had a reputation for being a hotspot for people with criminal records and other shady individuals. So she decided to try this theory and collect DNA samples from all the visitors of that nightclub. Letizia assigned several officers to stand guard at the nightclub on Fridays and Saturdays, collecting DNA samples from everyone entering. Since all club goers had membership cards, investigators could access information on everyone who had visited the club in the past. Although Letizia knew the chances of success were slim, she wanted to try everything in her power. Due to the lack of other leads, and soon she receives a call from the lab. DNA from one of the visitors matched the killer's profile. The man's name was Damiano, but there was a problem. The match was only partial, and Damiano was quickly cleared as a suspect, since he was on another continent at the time of Yara's disappearance. But still, this was a significant breakthrough. Experts assume that since his DNA only partially matched the killer's profile, Damiano must be related to the actual perpetrator. Letizia and her team began investigating Damiano's family to identify the most likely suspect. Since this was before genetic genealogy became common in criminal investigations, this method was new and extremely challenging. They soon made a surprising discovery. Damiano's mother had worked as a housekeeper for Yara's family for 10 years, but left the job a few years ago when she found out that someone from her family might be the killer. The woman was deeply shocked. Despite this revelation, the search for the suspect dragged on for many months. Letizia eventually concluded that none of Damiano's immediate relatives were Yara's murderer, which meant they would need to investigate hundreds, if not thousands, of distant relatives. As months passed without progress, the media began accusing Letizia and her team of incompetence and reluctance to work on the case. Several politicians joined in trying to have the detective removed, but they were unsuccessful. Despite the heavy pressure, Letizia continued to do everything in her power to identify the killer. She and her team examined various family trees and archival records dating back to 1716. They had to review thousands of individuals repeatedly hitting dead ends. This continued until September 2011, when investigators finally made a breakthrough. One family tree led them to a man named Giuseppe, who was already deceased. However, his widow had preserved some postmarks with his saliva, and experts managed to extract a DNA profile. The results showed that Giuseppe was very likely the father or grandfather of the killer, whose DNA was found on the victim's underwear. Giuseppe had 2 sons, and investigators obtained their DNA samples, but they faced another unexpected disappointment. Although the results showed a close match, neither of the sons was the killer. This left Letizia stumped. The killer had to be closely related to this family, but none of the male members showed a complete match. The only remaining possibility was that Giuseppe might have had a child with another woman, a child his family knew nothing about. Detectives focused on this lead, but uncovering such sensitive information proved extremely difficult. They interviewed thousands of people who might have known or seen Giuseppe during his lifetime. Nearly a year later, they got an intriguing clue. Since the 1960s, Giuseppe had been visiting a spa complex in a small town near Milan without his wife. He stayed there for 2 weeks, every day, and never brought his family along. The teacher requested records of all visitors to the spa complex during those years. To her surprise, these documents were still available, and investigators began examining them. They compiled a list of all the women who stayed at the spa during the same time as Giuseppe. This process stretched over a year, but the teacher still couldn't get any closer to identifying Giuseppe's possible lover. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of what they were doing, and the theory about a secret child sparked widespread interest across Italy. Journalists eager to capitalize on this attention began their own searches for children born from extramarital affairs. To their surprise, they uncovered many such stories. In one small village, for example, they found 5 such children. This continued until 2014, when investigators finally made some progress. With the widespread attention on the case and the search for Giuseppe's possible lover, the police received numerous tips, but all of them led to dead ends. But in the summer of that year, they received a tip suggesting that Giuseppe might have had an affair with a woman named Esther Art Sophie. Reviewing their records, investigators suddenly discovered that they had already collected a DNA sample from Esther 2 years earlier. However, the results showed she was not related to the killer. Still, Letizia decided to request a new analysis, and the results were shocking. It turned out that the initial expert had mistakenly compared the killer's DNA with Yara's DNA instead of Esther's. When a different expert re-examined the correct samples, they found that Esther was indeed the killer's mother. With the long-awaited confirmation in hand, Letizia discovered that Esther had 3 children, including twins, a boy and a girl who fit the age profile. Although the twins were considered the children of Esther's legal husband, investigators suspected that in reality Giuseppe was the biological father. Since the killer was clearly male, they focused on Esther's son. At the time of the investigation, he was 42 years old, worked as a construction worker, and lived with his wife and children in Marbella, the same town where your cell phone signal had disappeared. Letizia quickly came up with a plan to obtain his DNA sample without spooking him. She learned that he used a specific road every day and arranged a sobriety checkpoint there. The man, unaware of the real reason, blew into the breathalyzer, which was immediately sent to the lab with his saliva. Almost 4 years after the murder, Letizia finally received long-awaited confirmation. His DNA fully matched the biological sample found on Yara's underwear. This man's name was Massimo Bizzè, and on June 16th, he was finally arrested. The city denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he was innocent. So the case went to trial. During the preparations, investigators uncovered several alarming facts that indirectly implicated the city. His browser history showed searches of an unaccepted nature related to minors. On the evening of Yara's disappearance, his cell phone was located in her town, but was turned off at 5:45 p.m. and not turned on again until the next morning. The city's car was captured on surveillance footage near the sports center on the same evening, just minutes before Yara vanished. The car had no license plates, making it difficult to identify the driver before his arrest. Now it was confirmed to be his vehicle. Interestingly, fibers from his car seats matched the fibers found on the victim's body. The prosecution also called a witness who lived in Yara's town. The woman testified that on the evening of the disappearance, she had gone outside to take out the trash when she saw a car speeding by her house. According to her description, the vehicle resembled Mercedes' car and she saw a child inside. She added that she heard screams coming from the car. Police also discovered that he frequently stopped at a pizza restaurant on the same street as Yara's home. This suggested that he might have seen her long before the abduction and possibly had been planning the crime in advance. Regarding the surveillance footage, the city claimed he was simply driving home from work that evening, but investigators found that he did not work that day, which was confirmed by his colleagues' testimonies, CCTV footage, and cell phone location data. The trial began in the summer of 2015, a year after his arrest, and it quickly captured the attention of millions across Italy. While most people were sure, the boss said he was the killer, no one could have anticipated the twists this trial would reveal. The prosecution's version was clear, but said he had likely been watching Yara for days or even weeks before deciding to abduct her after she left the sports complex alone. He then took her to the field, where her body was later discovered and killed her. The main theory was that he had intended to assault her, but for some reason he didn't go through with it. Besides, his wife testified that he was home with the family, having dinner at the time Yara went missing, but this was contradicted by CCTV footage near the sports complex and 3 witnesses who saw Mercedes' car at the time. He claimed to be at home. The defense argued that their client was innocent, but said he himself claimed he often had nosebleeds, which could have gotten on his clothes and tools. His lawyer suggested that the real killer might have somehow come into contact with Mercedes' blood before the crime, which then ended up on the victim's underwear. The defense also challenged the DNA evidence, claiming that a mistake might have been made. They explained that there are 2 types of DNA, one that changes significantly between relatives, and another one that changes very slowly over generations. The DNA found on the victim's underwear was of the slower changing type, so the defense argued that it could belong to anyone related to whether close or distant. But the prosecution's experts countered this, insisting that Mercedes' DNA matched the evidence beyond any doubt. But that wasn't the defense's main argument. During the trial, they dropped a bombshell that caused a huge stir. They named a new suspect, a gym instructor named Sylvia. It turned out that after the body was discovered, experts found Sylvia's blood on the sleeve of Yara's jacket. Sylvia's father revealed that when she came home after Yara's disappearance, she had been crying all night. Investigators also uncovered that Sylvia had exchanged a few text messages with her brother on the evening of Yara's disappearance, but both of them deleted the messages soon afterward, leaving their content unknown. When questioned, Sylvia claimed she couldn't recall what she had written, why she deleted the messages, or how her blood ended up on Yara's clothing. In court, she refused to provide answers, repeatedly stating, "I don't know." Despite the absence of a clear explanation for these troubling discoveries, the evidence against Musetti was deemed sufficient for conviction. In the summer of 2016, he was sentenced to life in prison, and his legal team failed to overturn the verdict. Adding to the drama, the very next day after the ruling, his wife visited him in prison and confessed that none of their 3 children were his, admitting she had been unfaithful with multiple men. It also emerged that Esther's 3rd child was fathered not by her husband or by Giuseppe, but by yet another man. Since then, Boselli has remained behind bars, though the mystery of Sylvia's blood continues to unsettle many who followed the case. Some view it as so suspicious that they question whether he was truly guilty, even speculating that the DNA evidence could have been tampered with. Still, this case stands as one of the most high-profile in modern Italian history. Every piece of evidence was thoroughly analyzed by the nation's top forensic experts, leaving the chances of his wrongful conviction exceedingly slim.